Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Leto Hall and the Delphi Economic Forum. My name is Christian Schubert. I'm a journalist with the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, covering Italy and Greece. But much more importantly, I would like to welcome our distinguished guest, Mr. Joaquim Miranda Sarmento, Finance Minister of Portugal. Thank you very much, Minister, for being here. This morning is about a topic we all would like to know, the future of Europe. How does it look like? Of course, nobody has a crystal ball, but at least we can create the conditions that we have a future in Europe, and hopefully a decent future in Europe. Yeah. So Portugal, of course, is a very interesting case. Not long ago, or several years ago, the country was in a deep crisis, but today Portugal is back, has above average growth, has low unemployment, and public debt came down in quite an impressive way. So I'm sure there are lessons that can be learned. But first of all, I would like to leave the floor on our major question to you for some introductory remarks, Minister. What kind of Europe do we want? What kind of Europe should we have? 5 minutes, please, and then questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the invitation, the opportunity to be here. Looking at the future of Europe, I would say that our main challenge, besides defense, and I'll go to that in a moment, is economic growth and competitiveness. If we look, since 2008, our productivity has basically stagnated. Unlike the US, that continued to increase productivity in the last 15 years, Europe's productivity stagnated, which means that we had very low economic growth. And this low productivity with low competitiveness leading to a low growth is the main reason why salaries and incomes, real salaries and incomes, have also stagnated in most of the European countries. That's the reason why there's a pressure on public services and on public finance in many countries, with most of them with fiscal deficits, with debts above 60%, and in some cases above 90 or 100% of GDP. So the future of Europe has to be strongly committed with increasing productivity and increasing economic growth. And by that, and using the example of Portugal, 15 years ago we had a major crisis. We have to ask for a bailout of the Troika, but structural reforms pay off. We did a lot of structural reforms in the last 10, 15 years. We changed substantially our labor market, our real estate rules, our public administration. We made structural changes in the prospect and in the configuration of our economy, and that is paying off. So what have Europe to do? What should be the priorities, in my opinion, in terms of structural reforms to boost productivity and economic growth? Reduce bureaucracy, reduce regulation and red tape, and reduce the cost of doing business. And this is something that the Commission, finally, this new Commission, is keen to address. There is substantial burdensome of regulation in Europe, especially compared, again, with the US, but other areas of the globe. Improve the capacity of our workers, also regulate migration, but assuming that there is a demographic problem and we need workers, and we need to increase the skill and the capacity of those workers. We need to complete the capital markets union and the banking union and integrate more financial markets, and with our firms being less confined and less based on the banking sector. We need to create single markets in areas such as banking, energy, telecommunications, financial services. We need also to improve some of our infrastructures in areas of transport, We need to improve and increase our research in areas like artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and other areas. So there are a significant number of structural reforms that need to be done in order to boost productivity. The European Commission has presented a very significant roadmap of those reforms for the next years. We tend to give a substantial amount of time to discussions that are relevant but are in this moment. But in the long term, the main problem of Europe is this lack of productivity and the need to increase economic growth.
Thank you, thank you. Now, in this long list that you made up, just one detailed point: you did not mention the Green Deal. So the previous commission in Brussels was quite keen on it. So you are less keen on that?
No, I think we need to balance. I mean, the decarbonization and the energy transition is very important, and obviously Europe should continue to be committed, but we need to balance. Energy is a product that we use in our lives, but firms use as an input. So, like any product, we need to consider that there are security issues. We need to assure the access to energy, either primary sources or secondary, like electricity. We need to assure security. We need to diversify the sources of energy so that we can have low prices and price stability. And obviously, we have to consider and continue on that effort of climate change. But we need to balance that with other issues on energy, especially because energy is also one of the main reasons why we lack competitiveness when we compare to the US.
But just a brief point, in the Green Deal there's much more, right? There's the end of the combustion engine in 2035 and strong demands for the steel industry. Would you slow down a little bit there? Would you be in favor of that?
I think any plan needs to be adjusted to reality. So we're now facing new challenges. We have this, hypothetically, trade war with the US, or at least
I want to come to that.
A strong discussion on tariffs. We are also facing competition from other areas of the globe. So I think we need to consider that energy has several dimensions, and those dimensions need to be balanced and compatible among them, and security and price is also essential on this topic.
Now, in general, on Europe, we want Europe to be a global power, not to be a victim in this power play of other blocs. So, to become a real power, that would actually mean that we transfer competencies, or let's say power, from the national to the supranational level. But at the same time, we have in several European countries nationalistic movements who say exactly, we don't want that. We want to keep the power on the national level. So how do you resolve this contradiction or this dilemma?
Well, I think in most cases, one of the main reasons why we have seen in the last, let's say, 10, 50, 20 years, the rise of this nationalistic far right and far left extreme movements is exactly because in several sectors of our society, incomes have stagnated and people are feeling that their lives didn't improve as much as they expected 20 years ago. So the more Europe and the European Union can do to level up the quality and the level of life of these people, level up salaries and public services, the more Europe will be perceived, like it was in Portugal for also a long time, as an opportunity and not as a risk or a downside. So and for that, again, we need to go to the structural reforms, and we need to...
But first of all, on the national level, on the level of national governments who have to do these structural reforms, right?
On the national level, but also at European level. I mean, when we look at how difficult it is to do business in European countries, how much regulation there is, a substantial part of
also
that...
coming from Europe, you're saying?
Coming from Brussels. Yeah. When we think that we don't have integrated markets in energy, for instance, or in financial markets, or in banking. And let's take the example of energy. We have some countries that are capable of producing electricity on nuclear. Others don't have dimension for that, but have more capacity to produce on renewables. The much integrated and interlinked these countries are, the most easy will be to manage energy at European level, again, as a portfolio. When there is conditions to produce renewables, countries like Portugal, Spain, Greece can do it. When there is less conditions, as they are intermittent, when there's less conditions, then countries that have the capacity and the dimension to produce, for instance, on nuclear, can produce more and sell to those countries. So the more integrated the European markets are, the more competitive we will be, and then that is the way for Europe to go back to be perceived by most of the population as an opportunity, as an instrument to improve the well-being and the welfare of people, and not as an obstacle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Europe might in the future be an economic area which has a lot of internal trade, but still we want to export, we want to import with the non-EU world, let's say. So here we come to trade. In this current world of uncertainty, and I think I feel a little bit sorry for every customs officer these days. What kind of tariffs should he or she apply? It's not really clear. So in this uncertainty with the US administration, how should Europe react? Should we also in these upcoming negotiations show rather a position of strength, or show also, or more a position of willingness to compromise?
Well, first and foremost, I never like the word retaliation, so I don't think Europe should see any decision making on tariffs as a retaliation. I think we need to de-escalate what is happening. We need to negotiate. Basically what this American administration wants to reduce the trade deficit, the US trade deficit, for several reasons. One is an economic view that I would call a neo-mercantilism economic view, which in my opinion, and I would say 99.9% of economists, is a wrong economic view, but you have to face it. For some reason, there is this belief that trade deficits are a negative thing by itself, and that they are not. Trade deficit or trade surplus are the consequence of the fact that the world is based on the dollar and the international financial system is based on the dollar, and that we trade dollars to buy commodities, that we use dollars as a reserve asset or a reserve value. But there are also other concerns on the US administration, in my opinion. There's also the issue of the votes and the political support. So most of this is because the political support for this administration is based on areas of the US that lost industry, the Rust Belt, the Midwest. We all know that globalization have improved the standards of life, generally speaking, but in some areas, some were left behind. It's the Stolper-Samuelson theorem. Is also doing this because the reduction of industrialization in the US also poses security questions. The main issue is that the fact that the dollar is at the center of the international financial markets is leading for increasing twin deficits in the US. And as US, as a share of the world GDP, is shrinking, it's becoming more and more difficult to finance these deficits. What I would suggest, and I've been doing this at Eurogroup ECOFIN meetings, is that we need to negotiate with him. Europe has a significant trade surplus with the US. We don't, I mean, trade surplus and trade deficits are only relevant, or trade surplus are only relevant if you have no one to finance you. It happened with Portugal 3 times in the last 50 years, but that's not going to happen with the European Union. In fact, this could be an opportunity to strengthen the role of the euro in the international financial markets. So I would say there are 2 things that we need in the short term, which is military equipments and energy, and he's willing to sell both. So I think we can arrange for an agreement where part of this trade deficit that US has with Europe on goods could be realigned with Europe buying more military equipment and more energy. This doesn't mean...
LNG basically?
LNG.
At a very high price? Yeah.
No, the price will be the market because it's a commodity. But again, on defense, it's important also to realize this. We need to increase defense spending. That increase on defense spending in the medium term should be used to also help reindustrialize Europe, to increase the size of industry, R&D, innovation, but that will take time. So I would say in defense that we need to, on the short term, to re-equip and increase the strength of Europe, and that part of that is also buying US military equipment. And then on the medium term, we need to also create a strong industry defense that will help us to reindustrialize Europe. So I think it's the only way...
How does this work, you know, incentive-wise? I mean, we need to give industry incentives and the perspective of contracts so that they create more production capacity in Europe, right? And we also want to become more independent from American suppliers, because this is, in the military field, to be autonomous is very useful, right?
What we have to do in Europe is coordinate at European level, and I'm including here the United Kingdom and Norway, not just the European Union, to coordinate, to be able to specialize countries in what each country will do in terms of defense. Think on Portugal. I've been advocating that we should mainly focus on Navy, Air Force, due to our geographical position. We are the ones that will defend our western border from any attack on communications or other infrastructures. So we need to coordinate specialization on each country, and then we need to have short-term and medium-term plans. Short-term is what we need now to assure our capacity of defense, and most of that will be purchasing. And then medium and long-term, what we'll need 5 and 10 years from now, and that could be produced and develop and produce in Europe by an European industry defense. So we need this short, medium, long-term plan.
Can I cut you there, because we don't have that much time? Portugal is far away from the 2% spending objective of defense, and I read some remarks that you are rather cautious in bringing it up. Is that true? I mean, does Portugal also see this need to bring up the defense spending, and does Portugal understand that there is a new threat coming from the east, from Putin and from Russia?
Well, we're fully aligned with our...
Especially without the protection of the Americans. Sorry.
Yeah. No, there are several threats to European security, and obviously the disengage that we could be faced in terms of Europe and US increase those threats. We are fully aligned in our international committees. There will be a NATO meeting in June to, again, to update what are the national plans. What I said a few weeks ago to another newspaper is that we will continue to increase defense spending, but fiscal balance is also very important for us. 15 years ago, we had a huge crisis on the debt sovereign crisis. We had to ask for a bailout. So we will continue to be very conservative on the fiscal balance. We had last year a fiscal surplus of 0.7% of GDP, but our public debt is still 95% of GDP. So the main driver of our fiscal conservatism is to continue to reduce public debt. So as long as we're able to continue to reduce our public debt 4 or 5 percentage points a year, and with the nominal GDP growth that we forecast for the next years, that will happen, we will be able to increase defense spending at least to 2% of GDP. Nevertheless, you don't increase defense spending on a very fast way. I mean, if you decide to construct military equipment, suppose that Portugal now decides to increase the number of their warships. The development and the construction of those warships will take several years. So this is not something that you go from 1.6% of GDP, which was our number in 2024, to 3% in 2 years. We are strongly committed to increase our defense spending. We also need it. We have a huge border, especially on the Atlantic, to defend. But fiscal balance is extremely important for us, and we need to continue to reduce our public debt.
Can I come back quickly to this question of the big power blocks in the world? Now, let's say Donald Trump is really, in a way, trying to exclude the United States from the global trade, which he might not do, hopefully, but if it goes into that direction, what should the rest of the world do? Should Europe, in the end, get closer to China, or should Europe kind of protect itself against China?
Oh, I think Europe should be the main sponsor of fair and free trade. We should continue to increase our trade agreements. We're closed one with South America last year. So Europe should continue to be the main advocate that trade needs to be free but also fair.
Because what about all these goods that come from China at low prices? What about those?
Again, as long as they comply with EU regulations, as long as we know that they are fair in terms of producing, competition is what brings value to the consumers. In fact, if there's a relative consensus on economists that tariffs hurt most consumers of the country that impose tariffs, and consumers of low incomes.
Yeah.
So I think Europe should continue to be very committed with increasing trade partnerships, with increasing the conditions of trade. Nevertheless, again, free but fair trade.
In the end, I would like to come to a question concerning more Portugal and its politics itself. There are elections coming up. We talked about economic stability in Portugal, political stability maybe a little bit less. It's the third elections in 3 years, I understand. And one question is very important also in Germany, by the way. Will the Conservatives in the end do some sort of alliance with the extreme right, which is in Portugal the party called Chega, right? So will at some point you do a deal, or will you exclude it?
It's the third election in 4 years, which is unexpected. There is a red line for us, so there is no possibility of our party, which is a center-right party in the European Popular Party, family, there is no possibility of any agreement or any coalition or any deal with the far-right party Chega. We expect to win the election, to increase the number of our votes and MPs, and with that provide more stability, more political stability to a country that has been a success in economic and fiscal terms, but no possibility of any agreement with the far-right Chega party.
Yeah, I understand Portugal is also a country that really benefited from migration. Is that correct? A little bit like Spain, right? So how is this possible? Is it also because you get immigrants, for example, from Brazil, who already speak the language? Culturally, it's more easy to integrate. Is that one? Do you see migration as an advantage?
Well, there isn't a single economic sector in Portugal that doesn't lack workers and don't need more workers. We have moved, before the pandemics, we had around 500,000 migrants. We now have 1.6 million in a country that has a little bit above 10 million inhabitants. This was a huge jump. Most of the migrants, as you said, are coming from Brazil or from Africa-speaking Portuguese countries, which obviously helps in terms of integration, in terms of the culture, the language. We also seen in the last years substantial migration coming from countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. These people are absolutely essential to our economy, as just like almost all economies, advanced economies were lacking workforce. Nevertheless, this was a significant increase. I mean, from 5% population to 15% of population. I had to admit it had created some problems in terms, social, political problems in terms of how they were integrated, also the conditions that some of these people are living. So we have, when we reached government a year ago, we find a complete mess in this area, almost 500,000 people with no legal documents. We made a strong effort to legalize those who were possible to legalize and send away those that were not possible to legalize. I think we're in a much better position now, and but our job is to continue to integrate and provide the conditions of these people, because 99% of them are coming to Portugal to work, to improve their lives, to improve their family lives, like the Portuguese did in the 50s, 60s, 70s to Germany, France, Luxembourg, and like a lot of Portuguese continue to do it nowadays.
Good. Okay, so thank you very much. We've come to the end of our debate. Thank you very much for your kind words, and good luck to your work. We all need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.